After a long time of seeing you on a 3-inch screen, welcome to HQ in this strange changed format. So, as we open the meeting, a few things to announce. Of course, we will be video, we will be streaming. So there are no concept of confidential. If you had anything which is of a confidential personal nature, bear in mind that it might be. If you stand or want to move around, request when you're sitting down and speaking, it's optional. But you don't feel you have to in this environment. We're running with this today. We'll probably find the same setup for the AGM, but we'll just take stock. We'll take feedback from members as to how they're finding it, how it works, and we'll look at the national guidance advice. If anyone needs to leave, obviously we know the rules down there. There's no fire alarm or test planned for today. If the fire alarms go off, a fire officer in uniform will carry us all to this place.
I'd like to see that.
You'll be the front of the show. Apologies. We've had a number of apologies. You want to list the apologies, or just take those as read. There are this one member that we're still hoping will arrive. We've had 3 of our members who will be left the authority. We will deal with and record that at the AGM. We, in the past, would have had a presentation to retiring members because of the limitation on numbers in the room. Because not to that issue. For retiring members, we will make arrangements to visit them on their own fire stations and have a presentation. Nice and more appropriate and safe for the rest. Apologies, Councillor Preston, Councillor Barrington, also from the Assistant Chief. Now, can I call for any declarations of interest? Got the agenda before you. Let's have a declaration nature you'd like to add. There are no matters of urgency, so no need to change the order, and there are no items on this agenda requiring exclusion of press and public. So, we are having a presentation on item 4. We'll come to that shortly. So, at the main agenda, item 2, minutes of the previous meetings, pages 5 to 32.
Thank you, Chair. Just one small amendment. For some reason, under the list of names of people present, the first names are Councillor Barrington and Gray is in the stuff.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair.
So we'll move on then to item 3. That's the corporate risk register 2021, October to April update. Pages 32 to 108. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just introduce the report. The purpose of the report is to inform members of the current risks contained within the corporate risk register, and status of those risks and associated control measures that were put in place, including any updates from the period September to March 21. And the recommendation specifically that members approve the updated corporate risk register for 2020-2021, which incorporates the current status of those risks as of April 21. And again, just as a short introduction before we maybe take a review of the said risks. I just remember to recall members, the previously strategic leadership team has reviewed alongside the internal law, the corporate risk register, the approach that we've adopted in regards to risk management, and overall compliance was good with some substantial elements. And there was a recommendation at the time to review the risk appetite of the authority and tolerance. That has been done, and the corporate risk register gets regular review to reflect those recommendations. Without going into any specifics, Chair, given the breadth of the document itself, I'm happy to take any specific questions on any of the corporate risks that have been identified within the register.
Yes, thank you. Getting a little bit complicated. It's quite a detailed pattern. But I was just saying, very important for us to know, particularly when we're operating remotely, to be able to have a handle on what is happening in terms of management of the authority. And having an idea of what your major risks are is a traditional, but not the only means of having management control. So this is the way it's presented now. I think powers that be, the inspectors and so forth, they expect us to have this document. And more particularly, it's not just for officers to present the document, but for members to have the access to it and have an understanding of what the principal risks that we face as an organisation are. So if there's no questions, would that be noted and agreed? Thank you. So we move on to 4. The numbering here is a couple of pages different. 109 to 148. 2021 fatal fire and the 15-year trend analysis. Fires. Now, there's going to be a presentation. Well, half the room, Mark, is behind you. It's not a presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Bob, before you come in, I'll just introduce the board members, and then I'll bring you to do a detailed presentation. The purpose of the board members is to provide members with an insight into the fatal fires that we've responded to over the course of the last 12 months. But the report itself and presentation that will be delivered by Mark will go into a little bit more detail. Probably one of the only finance researchers to go back as a pre-event the time that we have done, so go back 15 years in regard to the significant incidents that affected residents of Merseyside, which has resulted in fatal fires and accidental dwelling fires. And we utilise this analysis to inform our strategy and our decisions moving forward. And so hopefully, as Mark starts to present some of the details, he will pick up some of the kind of common themes, and it may provide members with the reassurance that the approach that we've adopted reflects the kind of the prevalence of fatal fires across Merseyside, and as I say, we use that to inform our strategy and provide members with the reassurance that we are putting our resources and our people and our preventative work into the right places to have the best possible effect on the evening and the impact and reduce fire deaths across Merseyside. And with that in mind, I'll pass across to Mark, who will present some members.
The slides are before us as well, page 4.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks, Chair. Thank you, Chief, for the introduction. Some of the detail there. So, as Chief says, we in Merseyside are very fortunate that we have a business intelligence team who will use data for us really effectively. We think we're the only fire and rescue service that's able to look back over a 15-year period, given that we've been undertaking prevention to the standard. We've undertaken prevention to the standard for since around about 1999. So really rich data set, a broad data set that allows us to draw down some rich data and, as the Chief says, focus our activity moving forward to ensure that our strategy meets what's happened previously. So the 2 documents that you see in front of you and are appended to the packs. One is the 12-month look back over fatal fires, and one is a 15-year look back over fatal fires. Okay, so this is the headline, and I guess this looks back over the last 30 years or so, and each bar on the graph represents a year. And each number at the top of the bars on the graph sadly represents an individual who has died in an accidental dwelling fire. By nature, we know that accidental dwelling fires will happen, despite how hard we target our activity to stop these from happening. We know that we can impact accidental dwelling fires. We also know that we can impact, because of that, those people who succumb to them. So you'll see in around about 1992, 93, for the last 10 years of the last millennium, it wasn't infrequent that we were in the high teens for those people who sadly died by fire. At the turn of the millennium, as I said, since 1999, when our prevention activity started, we do notice an impact, and those people who sadly died coming down. A peak perhaps in 2015 and 16, you'll see where 16 people sadly died in a fire. We had multiple fatalities that year, but also that year, we were able to draw down data from our colleagues at the National Health Service called Exeter data. Members may recall that that data includes everyone who is linked to a GP over the age of 65. So we're able to draw down that data, look at it for our own purposes, and then refocus our activity. And that's what we've done since around 2015, 16. And you'll see over the course of the last few years, 7 fatalities, 4, 4, 5, and 7. And as I did explain, each of these numbers is an individual who sadly died in a fire. So I'm going to briefly just read out the last 7 of the last 12 months. There's more details in your pack, but just to give you some outline. 62-year-old female who died by a carelessly discarded cigarette. 63-year-old male who collapsed onto a lit gas fire. An 81-year-old male who died while he was burning refuse. A 76-year-old male who died by a carelessly discarded cigarette. A 54-year-old male who died by a carelessly discarded cigarette. A 37-year-old female who died by a carelessly discarded cigarette. And finally, a 62-year-old female who again died by a carelessly discarded cigarette. All real people. The next table I'll draw your attention to over the period of the last 15 years. 111 people have died in that period. You can see circled, those over the age of 60 feature more prominently than others on that particular table. There is a discrepancy in the 45 to 49 year age, 45 to 49 year age group. And we will talk around why that might be a little later in terms of people who died in more deprived areas of Merseyside. How do these fires start? Well, overwhelmingly, 53% of our fires where people have died in an accidental dwelling fire have been caused by a carelessly discarded cigarette. And you'll recall the list I just read out. 5 individuals out of 7 people who sadly died by fire are now no longer with us because of carelessly discarded smoking materials. What does that mean? So on the right-hand side, we see a packet of cigarettes there with 40% of the front label covered by government warning, smoking kills. That's quite clear, smoking kills. We as a fire and rescue service, we've worked really closely with our national colleagues in terms of communications, and we'll continue to do that, as well as our local communications. Perhaps previously we talked around, be careful with your smoking materials, perhaps don't smoke upstairs, perhaps put some water in your ashtray. We're now starting to move a little more towards stop smoking. We think that's the right thing to do. It's a public health issue. People who live in the more deprived areas can't necessarily afford cigarettes. And also, as we've seen, it's clearly a fire risk. So the message that we can push across to our communities is very powerful. And the message lands very powerfully when fire and rescue services start talking, stop smoking. So that's the next level that we will have in terms of our communication strategy. This is quite a busy slide. So if I start in the middle, I'm going to look at deprivation. So the middle of the 3 pictures on the top, they are the indices of deprivation. You might not necessarily see them on the presentation there, but I'll briefly talk to them. So these 7 domains make up the index of multiple deprivation, which you see on the right-hand side. Can't quite see them, unfortunately, behind the pictures there, but that's a map of England with lighter and darker areas. The darker areas being the more deprived areas of England. And it will be no surprise to members that many of these more deprived areas are across the 5 local authorities of Merseyside. And the index of multiple deprivation is 1, 2. Thank you, Vic, that's great. The index of multiple deprivation takes into account lower super output areas, so around 32,000 lower super output areas. You want to be number 32,000, you do not want to be number 1. We don't have number 1 in Merseyside currently as we speak, however, we do have very high numbers right across our 5 local authority areas. What does that mean in terms of home safety? On the left-hand side, we see a graph that talks about deprivation and how that features in those people who die in accidental dwelling fires. So the top graph, this is a local determination of deprivation. And what that does, if you look towards the left-hand side of that graph, you will see that there are more bars in the top 5. So that's the top half of most deprived areas in Merseyside. There's a broad spread right across all 10 deciles of the IMD in Merseyside. If we move that down, it's very easy for me to show you on the bottom graph there that we scale up enormously in terms of national deprivation on Merseyside. Why is that? Because the bar on the very left-hand side is extremely high. So what that says to us is that the areas in blue on the right-hand side of the slide on the map, they are not the worst places to live in Liverpool or Wirral or any of our 5 local authority areas or the Northwest or the region. Some of these areas are the most challenged places in terms of deprivation in England. And that makes it relatively straightforward for us as a fire and rescue service. Our home safety strategy is built on communications, where we talk about cigarettes and how we can impact that. But these 2 main features, older people and deprivation, if we focus on these 2 main features, we know that we can make an impact, we know that we can draw down accidental dwelling fires, and we know that we can stop accidental dwelling fire fatalities. Notionally, we're aware that people are putting food on the table, visiting food banks before they're able to provide batteries for their smoke alarms. So it's for us to find out where these people live, to make that interaction, and to make sure that the most vulnerable people in England, as you've seen, are kept safe from fire. On the left-hand side of the graphic there, you see the index of multiple deprivation is represented by darker colours. Okay, so the darker the colours, the more deprived areas. You'll see a corner in the northeast corner of Wirral, lots of Liverpool into South Liverpool and up into Southport, darker areas. You'll also notice the correlation of the dots in those darker areas. Those dots are accidental dwelling fires. So you'll see a clear correlation between deprivation and accidental dwelling fires. On the right-hand side, very similar in terms of the deprivation map. However, the coloured dots are 111 coloured dots that are referred to here today in the 15-year look back. So those are where people have died in accidental dwelling fires on Merseyside. And as you will see, most, if not all, fall within the most deprived areas. And this really is just a look back. It's been a very challenging year in terms of home safety. It's been a challenging year for everyone, in fact, but certainly for our own workforce, we've turned our hands to different things. How do we get back to what we're good at? Well, we risk assess how we get back. We make sure that the risk of COVID does not outweigh, we make sure that the risk of fire outweighs the risk of COVID once we start to get back into people's homes to make those interventions, to check smoke alarms and to make sure that the most vulnerable people in England are comfortable in their homes. We'll risk assess that along with our Public Health England colleagues, along with our National Fire Chief, guidance and direction, but also we can use external data. So the information that is on the screen in front of you here is the COVID early warning system, and that talks about 4 key areas. So vaccinations, hospitalizations, it talks about infection and mortality, and it also talks about how we find local variants. They're the 4 key areas to us getting back to normal. What does that mean? Well, the slide on the right-hand side is really important to us, because what that highlights is which people where have had 2 vaccinations. It highlights which people where have had 1 vaccination. We know that that alone is not a factor. However, along with other facets, we can risk assess how we get back to providing the best service in terms of prevention to the public of Merseyside. That concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take the questions.
No, thank you very much, Mark. Questions? Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned the correlation you have with the NHS, where you can connect. I was just looking at the case studies where the majority seem to be people living alone. I wondered if there was any essential services.
Through various routes, we do. We engage with multiple partners. The 7 fatalities last year, it's really difficult to find out trend analysis, a pattern, if you like. We work really closely with our national colleagues to see if there's anything there as well that might sort of stick out that we can focus on. But we certainly do engage with as many partners as we can in terms of identifying those who are most vulnerable. The challenge for us is to bring that organisation in so that we can focus it, push it back out to our crews, and then make that intervention.
That's great, thank you. It's difficult to, I suppose, convey people's privacy, isn't it? There's a line. Thank you.
Sure, just add a little bit to that. So, if you look at the kind of pillars of focus around the strategy, top of the strategies with fairly strong agencies. So, you know, we can kind of go down the street, we can knock on the door, and we can expect the person to open the door to go to 65. But actually, working with some of our partners, they are our teams, so they know around the so that people's homes and needs and so on and so forth. And that direct referral means that wherever we talk about the entity, great focus in on that on them. You know, people who are collective to die in a fire, so over 65, live alone, have the mobility difficulties, and so on and so forth. And that direct referral mechanism allows really kind of initiative interventions in their particular premises. Notwithstanding the fact that we draw in on the NHS data to ensure that everybody not has someone who would benefit from our interventions that people else that. But yet we do overlay data which suggests that individual that the care and support.
Okay, so Councillor Lakers.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, a fantastic piece of work which put together, very helpful. Perhaps the most interesting figure is the 6 out of 7 have received home safety checks. So it does actually indicate that we are targeting the right people, and you can only imagine how many lives have been saved compared to these people that have been damaged. It's shocking that we're losing so many people to discovered cigarettes in this day and age. Perhaps not surprising that alcohol is playing part in a significant number. I wonder how much mental health is also playing a part, particularly with depression. Very difficult thing to measure, but is there any feedback sought from GPs to try and measure that? Could actually help us to target people better in the future.
Thanks, Councillor, for your kind comments. In relation to your question, the answer is we're moving to capture more details. So there's a national piece of work ongoing in terms of how we look at what led an individual to become a fire fatality, and one of those factors is mental health. Clearly, that is a challenge for, for the nation moving forward. We don't currently have all the data, if I'm honest with you. However, there are, like I say, there are research projects going on that will involve also the fire and rescue sector nationally, probably changing some of our data capture elements so that we can then report on it. And it works relatively straightforwardly. So we look back over the course of an individual's lifetime, we work out why they have come to become a fire fatality. This is called the logistical regression. What that does for us when you upscale the data and we're able to then count the data and look at it and examine it in greater detail, that gives us the opportunity to then draw a line in the sand and then look forward. So that's it's called a predictive prevention strategy. There are many facets that will contribute to that predictive prevention strategy. Mental health absolutely will feature when we start to move that forward.
Thank you. Councillor Kosky. Sorry, Councillor Mel.
Sorry, still asleep.
Yeah.
My question is,
Sorry, Councillor Malone.
sorry, children, I was asleep.
Just to come back, I think it was around 2016, we had quite a few fatalities in St Helens with all the people actually coming out of hospital, being sent home in the middle of the winter to an empty property. I spent the day down in the old Barstow station and worked with protection just to see what was going on. And it was absolutely superb the way they worked there. They would not let a lady come home until somebody had been out, somebody had done the value check, and then the lady was allowed home. But she wasn't allowed home on her own. She had to be in the house with somebody to settle her. And I watched that happen at that station in this case, and it's really great. So well done to everybody there.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the I just wanted to get stranger behind you. You mentioned the correlation between food deprivation. You mentioned food banks, and it just maybe do something because I volunteer in a food bank. And we use it as an advice point as well. So we use it as sort of like to access other services or to signpost people on. So it's not just about putting food in people's bellies, it's about actually get out of the situation. A lot of the reasons why they're there is due to benefit problems that we can obviously help with. I just wondered whether it might be something that advisors consider going to some of these sessions on food banks and actually do prevention. Access the food banks,
Thanks, Councillor Coleman. Yeah, absolutely yes is the answer to that. As you may know, we've done some work very close to the pandemic. We work really closely. We have broad networks of people who give us information where people might be. Certainly those people who are accessing food banks will fall into that category, given the fact that there's no money to put a smoke alarm on the ceiling, when they need to access food banks. So absolutely yes. We have district officers, discharge our prevention activity through district officers right across the local authorities, and many of our local teams will talk to referral agencies such as the food banks. Will absolutely have that conversation with yourself, and we'll look to speak to food banks right across Merseyside.
Thanks, Chair. My question is where we're saying that we're looking at to get people to understand what's going on. I'm looking at the figures here. I never dreamt that would be like 4 years. My point is that in Merseyside we have every so many weeks we have where the team goes out and the fire service are to do with antisocial behaviour. And I think with this sort of thing of where
the house on the street doing it. Maybe more information could be given in that direct area where the deprivation is, and they let us in and other areas like that, where they actually go and knocking on the doors and wherever is a good place. And what would you say with Council Coleman, with the food bank, we know that them people obviously need the help or the support we could get, and maybe we could give them more information to pass on to people who need that. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, coming on that, firstly, taking a little bit of journey for Merseyside. So Mark describes back in 1999, Olympus does some kind of work emerging, and at that time, like universally, smoke alarms across the whole of Merseyside, recognising that actually smoke alarm was quite low, and that we were the vanguard of some of that work. Actually, as things change in smoke alarm ownership, more prevalent across Merseyside, and and funding and resources are challenging. And we focused in specifically on people who were over 65 and really targeted the people who were most vulnerable as the intelligence and data informs that. And then as Mark, we described, I think what we're seeing more latterly is deprivation playing a more significant part in not necessarily fatalities across Merseyside, but certainly the incidents that we were responding to. And what it shows is that smoke alarm ownership diminishing in those particular areas where deprivation is at its highest. And, and the adage of people choosing to put food on the table rather than the smoke alarm on the ceiling, that's what they want to do when they are so stressed. And people accessing food banks is a real indicator for us. And we've got lots of firefighters who are actively involved in supporting the food banks across Merseyside. So this is a natural reaction to the data, the information that's telling us that smoke alarm ownership is reducing. And as a result, to get ahead of that. And so we're not facing fatalities in those particular areas to go back and get back across the threshold into the particular premises. And that's captured within our new integrated management plan, and that's the approach that we will adopt moving forward. There are a whole multitude of partners and accessing communities who are at the heightened level of deprivation and certainly abject poverty in some parts of Merseyside, and we will work with the whole of the local authority infrastructure to be able to facilitate that and help partners and so on. A bit that I would also draw up just for members, kind of clarity, we talk about the fatal bias. Understandably, we drill into the number of incidents. We talk about that journey from high teens right through to single figures. Over the course of the last 4 years, 4, 4, 5, 7. And arguably, if you look at 4, 5, 7, you start to see increases, but we're talking about small numbers. So after I've sat down around the realities, the context in which we are operating, I think it's probably useful for me to share a couple of other bits with you. And this is just about reassurance around strategy that we've adopted. So over the course of the last 12 months, where we've had 7 fire deaths, we've actually had 799 accidental dwelling fires, compared with the previous year, where we had 5 fire deaths. 928, and before that, when we had 2 floors, we were over 1,000 accidental dwelling fires across Merseyside. So we have made significant impact on the number of accidental dwelling fires. It's a really good indicator of the direction of travel for the service. And the other thing which would reinforce that is the actual injuries for people who near misses in relation to a fatal instance. Our injuries are over the same period. So previous year was 90. Our injuries this time around were 59. So again, evidence or reassurance to members that we are making some progress. We are intervening in the right places, and we are, that's making some points. We are knocking on the right doors. We're providing advice and support. It's self-evident there. Sometimes accidental dwelling fires can fluctuate, but the direction of travel for Merseyside is a downward trend, given the outstanding preventative work that we do in our communities. But we are always looking to improve and respond, and what the data tells us now is you might just want to take a little bit of a look at those heightened levels of deprivation and really focusing on working with partners in those communities to provide advice, support, and actually, in some cases, and probably in most cases, smoke alarms. That would just reassure us that the people of Merseyside are protecting this issue.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mark, for the excellent presentation. As a ward councillor myself, in one of the most deprived areas in the UK, Bitson and St James and the Wirral. I'm obviously very disappointed, but not really surprised to hear that areas of high deprivation are more likely to suffer from fatal fires. And it's pleasing to be reassured by the chief that we do seem to be heading in the right direction. But I can't help thinking that as a society, generally, we need to do more to get the message across. And you showed us, Mark, as part of your presentation, a cigarette packet that said smoking kills. Now, I think that's meant to imply that the actual act of smoking can kill you. But I'm not really sure that the message has got across wide enough to people generally that discarded cigarettes might, at the time, it might seem very innocuous, but can literally, cause people to die. So I'm really requesting basically is what more can we do, not just as a fire authority, but as a society generally, to get that message across that you've got to be really vigilant. And I support what you're saying, that in the past we might have said to people, well, be careful where you smoke or whatever. Now, I think we do need to be stronger. Just stop smoking. I think we need to be stronger on that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Rennie?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Rob. That was fantastic presentation. Thank you. Are we able to share this as well with colleagues? So get back to that. Yeah, thank you. I was just contributing just from what Councillor Maloney was saying about people in charge of the hospital. I'm just wondering, I mean, it may not be the panacea for everything, but with the introduction of the integrated care coming in, NHS and adult social care, just wondering if we have a direct link into that really, because clearly, they are deciding on the packages and the vulnerability of people and how they're going to cope with it. And I was just concerned really that hopefully we do have a link into it. And if we do, what would be sort of a time lag on that? Because clearly somebody may be discharged. How would we get to know that in the time scale?
Again, Councillor Rennie, thanks for the question. I think I commented about the presentation. The answer is yes. So we work with partners really closely to get that type of data, with a particular focus on discharge. I can't, off the top of my head, give you the time scale around that. I don't imagine it will be a great deal. However, I don't have that data with me at the moment, so I'm afraid I can get that for you.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's just imperative, isn't it? That, we as a fire service get shown in touch with those opportunities.
If I may, have the reassurance, Councillor Rennie, that as soon as we get for a hospital discharge or someone who's particularly vulnerable, referred by a partner agency, they have some of the priority list. We will probably get out to see them within the 24, 48 hours. And that cash list will probably get out there.
Thank you, Chair. I just apologise for being a few minutes late. I discovered the bus service is not as reliable as the fire service.
It is a wet
As a Wirral councillor, again, I thank you for the presentation, Mark. As a Wirral councillor, it's pleasing to see that there were no fatalities recorded in our borough in this last period. But looking back historically, it had been one of the higher areas where there were deaths. And I know, as the Chief said, we're working with a very small number, mercifully, figures. But is there any particular reason, do you think, why historically Wirral was higher in the number of fatalities and presently, why there shouldn't be any this last year?
Thanks for the comments again, Councillor Bryan. In response to the question, you're right, the 15-year look back does give us, I guess, more rich data to look at. No fatalities, you're quite correct, in the last 12 months. I guess if I take you to page 135 of the pack, table 1 there talks about the breakdown of 1,000. So Wirral does appear to be heading over a little bit than the other local authority areas. Again,
number of it. 127.
So table 1 talks to the comparison of overall fatality counts, and the important number there is the number in the middle of the breakdown of the population, which, as I say, for Wirral is 10.8. Doesn't vary massively from the other 4 local authority areas. The chief has talked to the fact that we do work with mercifully, in your own words, relatively small numbers. So it only takes 1, perhaps 2 to skew these numbers. I'm not familiar of anything in particular. I do recall 1 or 2 occasions when we had double fatalities in Wirral over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. Because of that will put that particular figure in the higher bracket there.
That adds a couple of bits to that, just to the long memory in regards to some of the work that we've done, particularly around the Wirral, the work with the areas of Wirral and with reference sequences and so on and so forth. We have heightened levels of fires in those areas. And we've done an extensive amount of work around social care in those areas to understand the kind of discharge procedures from hospital, the care provision, working with carers in the area to ensure that they are our eyes and ears, the care plans effective, the smoke alarms are working, some of the easy remedies that they can put in, moving a heater away from an old vulnerable individual are addressed. And so we've done at the time, back to 2015-16, some extensive work around kind of communicate the message to ensure that the things that were important to us and the reason why people identified and communicated effectively. So it's really pleasing for me as well to see the fact that the Wirral has not had any deaths over that period. But something that I'm not going to be places about, we will continue to do that work across the board. Ensure adult care fails in and people who are going in to provide additional care to human vulnerable isolated individuals on our license.
Thanks for allowing me back into this question. I found out, noticed a few weeks ago that the company who do the liquid oxygen changed to another supplier, and I just wondered whether this new supplier was giving via service the information on what properties have got this liquid oxygen in, and it's bound to be found more of it about now. Since long COVID's coming.
Thanks, Councillor. The answer is yes. So I think it might be Air Liquid is the company that you referred to. So yeah, we work really closely with the oxygen providers, so we know where that particular risk might be with all vulnerable people.
Can I just say as well, we're talking about people who may not have a fire alarm system, and I'm guilty as anyone about testing whether your fire system is still working. Because mine's up there, I couldn't tell you when I've tested to see, so I'm just thinking, hello to people, as she says, is testing it to see if it does work. There may be sometimes they're not in like the Facebook pages or whatever. Have you tested your fire alarm system? Could be also a good prevention.
I think sometimes we say when you change the clocks, twice a year, change your alarms as well. I mean, that's just one of those things. We had a very good debate on this. My mind goes back to remember when we were in Europe, in the European community, and we lobbied halcyon then for something called RIP cigarettes, reduced ignition propensity. It was basically a self-extinguishing cigarette, and we tried and we lobbied in Europe about this, and it didn't get a lot of traction, but maybe the technology sometimes rises with these things, and it might be something that we could maybe look at, in terms of lobbying. Also here, fire blankets, cheap technology. It's not about smoking in bed, isn't that? But it's about maybe kitchen cooking fires and things like that. A fire blanket is a fibre, and it's very accessible. And it might be something that we want to try and look at providing for people, particularly in these areas where there is, a lot of deprivation. But we should not forget what's happening. A very good, very important. So this is all about members having a finger on the pulse of the key statistics that affect this service and our community. But bear in mind, we rescue more people from the river than die in fires. And we rescue a lot more people from car accidents and make their lives livable than again die in house fires, property fires. So we have to take this as part of the overall picture. It is one of the statistics upon which we are tested and assessed, but we do a lot more than just fight fires in houses and properties. It's part of the story. We have to look wider, preventing those fires, making those fires survivable, using new technology to change the way that we manage these situations, and also dealing with car, transport, leisure, and other situations as well. Any last words? Yes, yes.
Sorry, just to add, following on from Emma, if you make friends with Merseyside Fire and Rescue on Facebook, I've just shown Councillor Cullen, there's lots and lots of things saying test your alarms, barbecue season, there's lots of advice that you can then share.
Yeah, I mean, I've done the sensible note, you know, that particular time of the year will be canvassing, spring. You know, come out Sunday canvassing, change your clocks the night before and test your smoke detector. And it's also for us to cascade that information to our full networks as well. But let's try, there's more on the agenda now, unless there's anything else to capture. Can we, this is for noting and agree.
Sorry, Jane, we'll just ask, is it possible to get these slides sent to us as an email attachment to make it easier to pass on to people? Is that possible?
Answer to yes.
Yeah, thank you.
We can do that. Yeah, we'll do. Then you can cascade it to the other members.
Yeah.
Your politics. That'd be very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Chair, just a slight distraction there. What I will do as well is I'll send you across the strategic inspectors, which will go over to certainly kind of conclude with a review of the performance of Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service since the last time the steps achieved. I'm happy to take
I mean, there are other things like fires contained to the rule of origin, speed and weight of attack. And I really like that speed and weight of attack. For a house fire, a person's reported, we'll send 3 fire engines and we'll be there. Our first fire engine will be there, average say 6 minutes. It's about the best in the whole country. And why? Because we don't have community retained, we have great full-time firefighters, and we're a relatively small county. And these are a mixture. I was discussing this with the Chief before about having a dashboard of killer statistics. And 6 minutes, 3 engine, you know, 5 riding. These are killer statistics that other fire services cannot beat. So that was noted and agreed. Thank you. So we move on to item 5, accessibility audit, pages 149 or thereabouts onwards.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First report, it's for 4 members of the progress made in acquiring an accessibility auditor to complete the audit of all Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service premises to ensure that they are accessible, culturally informed and in a metropolitan way welcoming. And the recommendation that members note the specification and equally note that the officers have ordered the contract with the services an accessibility audit to Wilkinson Cohen Partnership for the sum of £40,150. Pretty much I'm probably less worried about the awarding of the contract and more around the kind of terms which we have brought them in. And it's twofold. One is accessibility from a public perspective, community fire stations, and albeit we've had to endure COVID over the course of the last 14 or so months, they are community fire stations with community facilities which we would want to be accessible to at all times to all people. And the auditors will come in and review that based on media qualities duty. But importantly, it's not just about being focused focused in on the community, but also our own members of staff, and ensuring that the arrangements that we've got in place are, culturally informed, and certainly specifically, if I'm honest with you, around gender specific, making sure that they are fit for purpose of a modern fire rescue service. Certainly one who is every day improving the diversity of the workforce. We want to make sure we continue to do that by having facilities and premises which are accessible and welcoming to all. So on that basis, this piece of work will be concluded. It builds on a previous piece of work that we've done probably back 3-4 years ago now, and an action plan which we implemented subsequently. It will no doubt kick out another range of actions which we will need to consider, deal with, and affect. And as a result of that, again, improving the environment in which we operate in and improve the accessibility of our stations. Again, Chair, I'm happy to take this section.
Any questions? Yes, please.
Thanks, Chief. I just wanted to ask a quick statement. Supplies in the Merseyside postcode area were invited to quote, and that was down to ensure the fastest service response time for the supplier. I don't really understand why it was in Merseyside.
We really well comment on that. I've got my own people.
I think it's because when they first looked to obtain quotes, that the feedback that they were getting that they couldn't conduct the works in time, and they were looking to localise the business as well from the Merseyside area with regards to obtaining the work from the area. So that's why there was such a vast amount. One of the areas where they felt in order to scale it down, just not go the only way, the response.
Because it says there was 73, I mean, that's narrowed down to 5 on Merseyside. That then ended up just having 2 quotes. I'm just thinking about contract signing numbers and get less value.
I believe when it went down to the 5 quotes, there was a reason why so 2 suppliers pulled out due to capacity issues, because there was an issue in actually being able to meet the deadlines, which left with the 2 quotes, which are quoted on paragraph 9. And then in regards to the best value, there's obviously, sorry, the other quote contained paragraph 9, but on the 2 quotes left, there was a difference in cost as well, obviously paragraph 9, and this company being the lowest quote. And then officers undertook a review of the quotations to ensure that they were getting best value, even though it was the lowest quote, but it was still the same standard as those within.
Because what I'm saying is, we had 70, we had chosen 73, put down to 5 just on the basis of we're choosing the policy from the Merseyside area or having the Merseyside postcode, so it might be a company that's national, but we've got sorry, so what we're trying to say is that we says 5 people, 5 purchase order terms and conditions of 5 suppliers, 2 of them dropped down, and 1. I'm just thinking about maybe we should pass the next figure to what bigger. Sure that getting 2 quotes.
Legally, work is taken by procurement and estates, not at the national review. And that's how they review the process and frameworks and what works could be conducted and what companies were available. So I do think that when work is undertaken, to review the best value of what's out there, and it's just so much choice, they then steps it down. I don't think it's a matter of automatically discounted as such, but from the procurement works that have gone underway, we managed to scale down on the same level, and then it was doing it. I'd have to go back to the head of procurement just to clarify the position.
in the contract standing orders, there's different levels for the cost of the work as well as to whether we are required to vote to the law. So this piece of work didn't apply as a value with the contract standing.
I think it's a very good point. I think certainly from the building student, you take that they look at this specifically on the student sensible. And there's a couple of bits which I've with members to interestingly in the first COVID and certainly across the board from one area to another and so on and so forth. The other one is probably more fundamental, maybe well been picked up and be picked up with scrutiny as a question to the authority, which is the utilisation of Merseyside small, medium-sized enterprises to undertake some work on behalf of the authority in the short to medium term, notwithstanding the standard principles, where there is a direction that the authority wants us to take. And again, I use that in respect of the Merseyside house to a greater or lesser degree, and and our investments and keeping things local being a thing like what we would maybe want to do in the future. Whether we see that being beneficial, something we would support, or something we would put sooner. The licensing will be the best value principles. So I know I haven't had conversations with Liverpool specifically around the strategic partnerships. There's really focusing in on how the Merseyside House and how we can better utilise public sector organisations to help them support the regeneration of the pool and the bounce back from COVID. So maybe that's for another time to share important things out there. I think there's a discussion to have. I think equally, I think the utilising the scrutiny arrangements for the authorities to take a look at this particular procurement of services and then play out that particular question. I think that needs to keep that well. Take them on board the authorities' views around that. Moving forward.
Thank you. I think this is a good thing. It's the advantage of having a wider membership that can give scrutiny and challenge to decisions that are being made. And we, for all of our own local authorities, know that there is, it is better. If we're criticising the government for a VIP list and letting anybody take a contract, having a system, having a way of ensuring that we're getting value for money and properly spending public funds. Absolutely the right thing. I think probably we've also got, at that level, we might have previously had to advertise this in the object. This would have been subject to European tendering. Now we've an opportunity to try and foster and promote homegrown Merseyside and slightly wider businesses. We want to try and do that. We possibly also want businesses which would employ younger people and apprenticeships. And there's lots of themes that we're trying to develop. I think at this level, the issue is, do we want to audit community access to our fire premises? Yes, it would be useful to do. It's actually, the money is at the level of it, it's almost £10,000 in the threshold of the chief officer delegated decision anyway. And it's over that sort of, there are some things which are up to £40,000 operational. This is just at that threshold. I think the chief's suggestion that this process, that's the thing, not this decision, but the process that led to this decision might well be something that the scrutiny committee, audit committee would want to look at. That's good. That's what this is all about. So with that in mind, I'm asking the audit committee, whichever it's up to them, to look at the process and how we arrived at this. Would members agree to the decision that's before us today?
It's already encouraged demonstrate to me to move forward. The idea being today is to know that this is happening and then we want to bring back to members exactly what's been delivered, what's been incorporated and how did it happen, could we do that? So it was just a note today and then bring back that scrutiny once we've got the first report.
So, recommendation at 2, note the specification audit, note officers awarded the contract for service. I see, I read that. Is that noted? So, on to 6. On to 6, model code of conduct, pages 163, thereabouts. Chief.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to request that members consider the new model code of conduct for members and the previous incorporation within the authority's constitution. There's a legal requirement for local authorities to have in place a code of conduct of their choosing. However, further to a report into local government ethical standards and the Committee for Standards of Public Life, it was established that there were significant variations in codes adopted by local authorities in length, clarity, and quality, and this also created confusion to the public. As a result of the report, it was recommended as best practice for local authorities to adopt a model code of conduct for members, either in whole or with local variations. There was a period of consultation within the sector and subsequently a model code of conduct was issued by the LGA, a copy of which is contained in Appendix B. Subsequently, the management officers from across the Liverpool City region met to discuss the model code of conduct and any consistent approach across the city region in respect of any local variations. There has been a proposed variation to the model code of conduct agreed across the city region, and it is contained within Appendix A, and it proposed to members to approve this varied adopted model code of conduct for members. The variation from the model code are highlighted in green. They are minimal, but create some further clarity for members in respect of bias, standard dispensations, as well as a local introduction as to who the supplies belong to in the city region. As referenced in paragraph 7, there is also one other difference in regards to the removal of the best practice recommendations from the model code, as these will require primary legislation and the government is yet to respond. However, it is recommended to members that I will bring back any such response from the government or any change in legislation which may well affect the code in any regard. It is also proposed to members that adopting the city region adopted amended model would also be beneficial, as obviously the authority is made up from members across all 5 district councils, and it may also benefit through joint training, which is currently being reviewed as well. Therefore, it is recommended to members to note the proposed code of conduct for members as contained in Appendix A, note the LGA model code of conduct contained in Appendix B, and approve the incorporation of the new code of conduct for members into the Constitution, replacing the current version in force as contained in Appendix A.
So, colleagues, are there any questions? So, there's 2 pieces here. One was the joining up of the regulations across the society. Very good. Members will be on their own principal authorities, and there'll be, codes applying to them. They may well serve on the joint board, they may well serve on the combined authority. Members shouldn't be put into a conflict situation where they're unsure of which rules apply to them and exactly the interpretation. It should be across the piece. Then, tracking parallel with that, a piece of work came from London, and that was about several PCCs are now becoming fire, or the fire services fall into the purview. And they said, well, look, we as PCC, we've got a code of conduct, basically, which is supposed to advise the relationship between the police chief, and the PCC. We feel that should also apply within the fire service as well. So a piece of work then cascaded down from the NJC in terms of being a model code of ethics for you know, fire service members, PCCs, fire, police and fire commissions and so on. It's all based on the knowledge principles, so it's fine, and it's all based on, you know, over here, there's our relationships with each other and the public and the political relationships. And over here are, that's members. Over here, it has then elected officials, elected administrators, and our relationship with our officers. There's another piece of work that's going on, which is about operational independence. This is quite important in the police service, where they feel that, you know, this is a sacrosanct issue. And when I've spoken to a number of police and fire commissioners who have been tracked, they say, well, it's not so much an issue in fire service. But there's another piece of work that's going on about operational independence. At this point in time, we are asked to note and within our, you know, constitution, if you like, the emerging local Merseyside and national codes of conduct for members and code of ethics as it emerges. A, I don't think we've got a choice about that. B, I think we welcome it. You know, it's fine. We've always had a relationship code, and we've never really had much problem with that. Then there's another piece just coming that's on the horizon, about operational independence. We'll deal with that when we get there. It's not always there. So, is there any questions in particular? If not, can we two members note code of conduct and day, note the LGA model code and approve this. Note and approve. Very, thank you. So now we move on to 7. This is with you as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members will be aware of the authority's long-standing relationship with the IGA through its subscription, and the benefits of such are identified in paragraphs 4 through 10. Members approved last year to annual direct debit payment with a continued subscription to the LGA, the costs of which are contained within the existing budgets. The Chair of the authority confirmed the continued membership prior to the next direct debit payment within its powers. And members are being asked to note the authority's continued membership of the LGA for 21-22. The 2.5% loyalty discount that has been applied, that we've continued to sign up to the direct debit payment scheme from last year. That received an additional 2.5% discount, and the content of the report. It may just be worth also mentioning in paragraph 15 that the LGA has requested that each of its member authorities appoint a dedicated policy and inclusion champion, and this previously been Councillor Grace. I appreciate that.
That's not pushing for you.
Yeah, I'm sure she would have provided some feedback if she did that. Happy to take any questions.
I mean, this is year in, year out. Broadly speaking, it used to be a lot more expensive, something like £60,000 for now it's gone down, a fraction of that. And it's in the budget, and that really should be a budgetary decision. A decision you make at budget time. If you put this in the budget, you have to give telephone service to leave. So if it's in the budget, we've obviously agreed to stay in. And I think that by exception, in future, that would be my proposal, but by exception, that we agree to roll this forward in the budget from year to year. It's in the budget, agreed in the budget, we stay in the LGA. If we choose for some reason to leave the LGA, we will move a resolution accordingly to give the necessary 12 months notice. And other fire authorities have done that, not us. So that's the proposal that we note that, we appreciate that membership, it's in the budget, and that running forward in future, we're in membership, and if we choose to leave, we will make the appropriate decision. It's okay. With that, Would that be agreed then? So that's the end of the business here. Any feedback on the way today's meeting has gone is much appreciated. Members have been, if they want one, issued with a pack of lateral flow test pack. If they want another of those packs, see Gemma. We have our AGM on the 10th, and it will be the same format, obviously with the refresh membership, and that is almost there. We've just got, I think, just Liverpool to make their decisions. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we'll just then know, we will circulate everyone to know what the new membership will be. We'll operate on this basis, and then we'll take a view on exactly how meetings need to be operated in the future. This seems to have worked, I would say, as well as can be expected in the circumstances. Thank you, colleagues, for your attendance. If you are retiring from the authority or seeking to retire from the authority, thank you for your service, and we will look at making presentations in an appropriate way and in a slightly different way than we have. So I'll close the meeting at that point. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.